Sarah Martinez stepped out of the taxi and looked up at the imposing gray buildings of Pine Ridge Military Academy. The morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured grounds, where groups of young cadets in crisp uniforms marched in formation. At 32, Sarah appeared smaller than most of the instructors walking around the campus. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore civilian clothes, a plain blue sweater and dark jeans that made her look more like a college student than a military instructor. The academy's main office was buzzing with activity when Sarah entered. Behind the reception desk sat Mrs. Henderson, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You must be our new physical training instructor," Mrs. Henderson said with a warm smile. "Welcome to Pine Ridge Academy. I'm Margaret Henderson, the administrative coordinator." "Thank you," Sarah replied softly. "I'm Sarah Martinez. I'm looking forward to working here." Mrs. Henderson handed her a thick folder containing class schedules, campus maps, and academy policies. "Your first class starts at 10 this morning. The cadets can be quite challenging, but I'm sure you'll do fine. Major Thompson will show you to your quarters and give you a tour of the facilities." Major Thompson appeared within minutes, a tall, stern-looking man in his late 40s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and his boots shined like mirrors. "Ms. Martinez," he said, extending a firm handshake, "welcome to Pine Ridge. I've reviewed your application, though I must say your background is rather unusual for this position." Sarah simply nodded. Her application had been deliberately vague, mentioning only previous military experience and specialized combat training. The academy had hired her based on excellent references from unnamed sources and her impressive physical fitness test scores. As they walked across the campus, Major Thompson explained the academy's strict traditions and high standards. "Our cadets come from military families or are preparing for service academies. They're bright, ambitious, and sometimes quite competitive. Physical training is taken very seriously here." They passed the dormitories where Sarah could see cadets preparing for their morning classes. Most of them were 17 or 18 years old, tall and athletic, their uniforms indicating their rank within the academy's hierarchy. "Your living quarters are in the instructor housing complex," Major Thompson continued, leading her toward a modest brick building. "Meals are served in the faculty dining hall, though you're welcome to eat with the cadets in the main cafeteria to build rapport." Sarah's apartment was small but comfortable, a living room, bedroom, kitchenette, and bathroom. The furniture was basic but functional, and large windows provided a view of the academy's training grounds. "Your first class consists of 30 senior cadets," Major Thompson said, consulting his schedule. "They're our most advanced group, scheduled to graduate in 6 months. Many have already received acceptance letters to West Point, Annapolis, or the Air Force Academy." After Major Thompson left, Sarah unpacked her few belongings. She had learned to travel light during her years of service, and her possessions fit easily into the small apartment. Her military awards and certificates remained packed away in a sealed box. She had no intention of displaying them. At 9:30, Sarah made her way to the gymnasium complex. The building was impressive, featuring state-of-the-art equipment, multiple training areas, and an indoor track. The main gymnasium could accommodate large groups for fitness testing and competitive events. As she approached the entrance, Sarah could hear loud voices and laughter coming from inside. Through the doorway, she saw 30 cadets gathered in loose formation. They were an imposing group, most over 6 feet tall, muscular from years of training, and clearly confident in their abilities. "I heard our new instructor is some woman who looks like she's barely out of college," one cadet was saying. His name tag read Brooks, and the insignia on his uniform identified him as a senior squad leader. "Maybe she's someone's daughter getting an easy job," laughed another cadet named Johnson. "I bet she's never done a real push-up in her life." A third cadet, Rodriguez, shook his head. Come on, guys. The academy wouldn't hire someone unqualified. She must have some kind of training. Training in what? Yoga? Brooks snorted. I've been preparing for the Marines since I was 14. My father served in Iraq, and his father fought in Vietnam. I don't need some civilian telling me about physical fitness. Sarah stood quietly outside the entrance, listening to their conversation. She had encountered similar attitudes before and knew that respect had to be earned, not demanded. When she finally entered the gymnasium, the cadets fell into a rough formation but continued talking among themselves. Brooks, clearly the informal leader of the group, looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. "Attention!" Sarah called out in a clear, firm voice. The cadets eventually quieted down, but their posture remained casual and disrespectful. Several were still whispering to each other. "Good morning," Sarah began. "I'm your new physical training instructor. We'll be working together for the remainder of your time here at the academy." Brooks raised his hand without waiting to be recognized. "Ma'am, with respect, what qualifications do you have to train future military officers?" The question was reasonable, but his tone was challenging. Sarah looked at him steadily for a moment before responding. "I have sufficient qualifications for this position," she said simply. "Today we'll start with basic fitness assessment to see where everyone stands." This triggered more murmuring among the cadets. They were used to instructors who listed their credentials and established their authority immediately. For the next hour, Sarah put them through standard fitness tests: push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and running. The cadets performed well as expected, but several made pointed comments about the easy routine. "Is this elementary school gym class?" Johnson muttered loud enough for others to hear. "My little sister does harder workouts than this," Brooks added, earning chuckles from his followers. Sarah made notes on her clipboard but said nothing. She observed their techniques, attitudes, and group dynamics. It was clear that Brooks and his close friends considered themselves the elite of the group, while several other cadets seemed to follow their lead out of social pressure rather than genuine agreement. After class, the cadets filed out of the gymnasium in small groups. Their conversations clearly focused on their new instructor. "She's not going to last a month," Brooks was saying. "Someone that soft doesn't belong in a military academy." "Maybe she'll quit before we have to deal with her all semester," Johnson agreed. Over the following days, the situation grew worse. The cadets tested Sarah's authority at every opportunity. They arrived late to class, performed exercises half-heartedly, and made increasingly disrespectful comments. During her third class, Brooks deliberately performed push-ups incorrectly, lowering himself only halfway and counting each repetition loudly. "That's not a proper push-up," Sarah corrected him. "I think I know how to do push-ups, ma'am," Brooks replied with fake politeness. "I've been doing them since middle school." When Sarah demonstrated the correct form, several cadets exchanged amused glances. "Maybe that's how they do it in civilian gyms," Rodriguez whispered, though he seemed less comfortable with the group's behavior than some of the others. The situation reached a breaking point during Sarah's second week at the academy. She had assigned the cadets a challenging obstacle course that included rope climbing, wall scaling, and sprint intervals. "This is ridiculous," Brooks announced as they gathered at the starting line. "We're training to be military officers, not circus performers." "At least it's more challenging than her usual kindergarten workouts," Johnson added. Sarah ignored their comments and explained the course layout. As the cadets began, most approached the obstacles with minimal effort, clearly intending to prove their point about the training being beneath their level. The rope climbing station proved particularly problematic. Several cadets struggled with the technique, but instead of accepting instruction, they became defensive and argumentative. "These ropes are too thick," complained a cadet named Williams. "The ones we used last year were completely different." "Maybe the instructor doesn't know how to set up the equipment properly," Brooks suggested loudly. Sarah watched patiently as cadet after cadet made excuses for their poor performance. When she offered technical advice, they dismissed it with barely concealed contempt. The wall scaling exercise was even worse. The 12-foot wooden wall required proper technique and teamwork, but the cadets were more interested in showing off than listening to instruction. Brooks attempted to climb the wall solo, refusing help from his teammates. When he failed on his second try, he jumped down angrily. "This wall is higher than regulation," he declared. "Someone set this up wrong." "The wall meets standard specifications," Sarah replied calmly. "I don't think you understand military training standards," Brooks shot back. "My father explained real obstacle courses to me. This isn't how it's supposed to work." Other cadets began nodding in agreement, feeding off Brooks's confidence and authority within their social hierarchy. That afternoon, Sarah found herself eating lunch alone in the faculty dining room. Major Thompson approached her table with a concerned expression. "How are things going with your classes?" he asked, sitting down across from her. "There are some challenges," Sarah admitted. "The cadets are testing boundaries." "That's normal for the first few weeks," Major Thompson said. "These young people are used to being the best at everything. They're naturally competitive." Sarah nodded, but said nothing about the increasingly hostile atmosphere in her classes. She had faced much worse situations during her military service and knew that complaining to administration would only make things worse. Over the weekend, Sarah spent time reviewing academy policies and planning more advanced training programs. She hoped that challenging the cadets appropriately might earn their respect and improve classroom dynamics. Monday morning brought new problems. When Sarah arrived at the gymnasium, she found that someone had rearranged all the equipment and left training mats scattered across the floor. The cadets arrived for class looking particularly smug. Brooks and his core group were clearly pleased with themselves, while other cadets seemed nervous about what might happen next. "Someone seems to have made a mess in here," Sarah observed, looking around the disorganized gymnasium. "Maybe the cleaning crew doesn't know how to do their job," Brooks suggested with mock innocence. Sarah spent the first 10 minutes of class reorganizing the equipment, while the cadets stood around making unhelpful comments. Their disrespect was becoming bolder with each passing day. During the workout, Brooks deliberately performed every exercise incorrectly, encouraging others to follow his example. When Sarah attempted to make corrections, he responded with increasingly creative excuses. "I think my technique is fine," he said during squat exercises. "This is how my father taught me, and he was a Marine Corps drill instructor." "Your father would want you to perform the exercise correctly," Sarah replied. "I don't think you know my father well enough to make that assumption," Brooks shot back, earning appreciative chuckles from his supporters. The confrontation was building toward something more serious, and Sarah could feel the tension in the room. The other cadets were watching carefully, waiting to see how far Brooks would push things. After class, Sarah overheard Brooks talking to his friends near the equipment storage room. "She's completely out of her league here," he was saying. "Someone needs to show her that she doesn't belong at a military academy." "What do you have in mind?" Johnson asked. "I'm thinking about it," Brooks replied with a dangerous smile. "Something that will make it clear she should find another job." That evening, Sarah walked around the academy grounds, thinking about her situation. The campus was beautiful in the twilight, with impressive old buildings and carefully maintained landscaping. She had taken this job hoping for a quieter life after her years of intense military service, but it was becoming clear that some battles couldn't be avoided. As she passed the dormitory buildings, Sarah could hear cadets talking and laughing through open windows. Some were studying, others were playing video games or video chatting with friends and family. They were still teenagers in many ways, despite their military ambitions and advanced training. Near the main academic building stood a 5-story structure that housed classrooms and administrative offices. A rooftop access area was used for astronomy classes and provided views of the surrounding countryside. Sarah had noticed cadets gathering there during free time, apparently drawn by the privacy and elevated perspective. The next few days brought more escalating confrontations. Brooks had clearly decided that Sarah represented some kind of threat to his status within the cadet hierarchy. His challenges became more direct, and his followers grew bolder in their disrespect. During Wednesday's class, Brooks openly questioned every instruction Sarah gave. "I don't think that's the right way to do that exercise," he announced during warm-up stretches. "These are standard military calisthenics," Sarah replied. "Maybe standard for some branches," Brooks said dismissively, "but Marines do things differently." When Sarah assigned running exercises, Brooks complained about the distance and pace. When she organized team drills, he criticized the rules and objectives. His constant challenges were making it impossible to conduct effective training sessions. Other cadets were becoming uncomfortable with the situation. Rodriguez approached Sarah after class on Thursday. "Ma'am, I want you to know that not all of us agree with how Brooks is acting," he said quietly. "Some of us think you're doing a good job." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "But you shouldn't worry about it. These situations have a way of working themselves out." Rodriguez looked puzzled by her calm response, but nodded and hurried to catch up with his classmates. Friday afternoon brought the confrontation that would change everything. Brooks had spent the week building toward some kind of dramatic gesture that would establish his dominance once and for all. After Friday's class, he gathered his core supporters for a private conversation. "Tonight we're going to settle this situation permanently," he announced. "Meet me at the rooftop access door at midnight." "What are you planning?" Williams asked nervously. "Don't worry about it," Brooks replied. "Just be there if you want to be part of something that people will remember." As midnight approached, 6 cadets made their way quietly through the dormitory buildings toward the main academic structure. Brooks had carefully chosen his team. Johnson and Williams were his closest allies, while Peterson, Davis, and Kumar were newer recruits to his inner circle who were eager to prove their loyalty. The rooftop access door was supposed to be locked after hours, but Brooks had discovered that the electronic lock could be bypassed with a simple technique he had learned from online videos. "Are you sure about this?" Peterson whispered as they climbed the stairs to the 5th floor. "Trust me," Brooks whispered back. "After tonight, things are going to be different around here." They reached the rooftop access door and waited in the darkened stairwell. Brooks checked his watch, 12:15 a.m. "Where is she?" Davis asked impatiently. "She'll come," Brooks said confidently. "I left a note in her mailbox saying there was an emergency meeting about her teaching methods." At 12:30, they heard footsteps in the stairwell below. Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, looking alert but unsuspicious. "You said there was an emergency meeting?" she asked, looking around at the group of cadets. "There is," Brooks replied, his voice taking on a menacing tone. "The emergency is that you don't belong here." The other cadets spread out slightly, blocking Sarah's access to the stairs. The situation had suddenly become threatening, and Sarah's expression grew more serious. "This isn't appropriate," she said firmly. "You all need to return to your dormitories immediately." "I don't think so," Brooks replied, stepping closer. "You see, we've decided that you're not qualified to train future military officers, so we're going to help you find a new career." He gestured toward the rooftop access door. "After you." Sarah looked at the 6 cadets surrounding her and realized the serious danger she was in. These young men were large, athletic, and clearly committed to whatever plan Brooks had devised. "I'm not going up there with you," she said calmly. "Yes, you are," Johnson said, moving to block her path more completely. The confrontation was reaching a critical point, and the cadets could feel their adrenaline rising. They had crossed a line from harassment into something much more serious, but Brooks's leadership had convinced them they were justified in their actions. What none of them realized was that the quiet, seemingly helpless instructor they were threatening had faced far more dangerous situations than anything they could imagine. Sarah's calm demeanor wasn't fear. It was the professional assessment of a trained combat veteran evaluating her options and preparing to respond. The next few minutes would change everything for everyone involved, as the cadets were about to discover that their assumptions about their new instructor were dangerously, dramatically wrong. Brooks pushed open the rooftop access door, and cool night air swept into the stairwell. The roof of the academic building stretched out before them, lit dimly by security lights mounted on the corners. From this height, the entire academy campus was visible, including the dormitories where other cadets slept peacefully, unaware of what was happening 5 stories above them. "Move!" Brooks commanded, gesturing for Sarah to step onto the roof. Sarah remained motionless. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, this isn't the way to handle your concerns about my teaching." "Oh, we're way past concerns about teaching," Brooks replied with a cold smile. "This is about respect, about showing you that you don't belong in our world." The 6 cadets formed a semicircle behind Sarah, effectively forcing her through the doorway and onto the roof. Johnson and Williams flanked her sides while Peterson, Davis, and Kumar spread out to block any escape routes. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Brooks continued as they moved across the rooftop toward the edge. "We're the future leaders of the American military. We've been training for this our entire lives. And you're just some civilian who thought she could walk into our academy and pretend to be one of us," Johnson added, his voice full of contempt. Sarah's eyes swept across the roof, automatically noting exit points, potential weapons, and the positions of each cadet. Years of training had taught her to assess tactical situations instantly, even when appearing calm and cooperative. "My qualifications aren't the issue here," Sarah said evenly. "What you're doing right now could ruin your military careers before they even begin. I don't think anyone will care what happens to a failed instructor who couldn't handle the pressure," Brooks replied, pushing Sarah closer to the roof's edge. The building's perimeter was protected by a 3-foot concrete barrier topped with metal railings, but beyond that was a straight drop to the courtyard below. Security lighting from the ground level cast strange shadows across the roof, making the scene look even more ominous. "You see," Brooks explained, clearly enjoying his position of power, "accidents happen at military academies. Training can be dangerous. Sometimes people get hurt when they're not properly prepared for the challenges." "You're talking about murdering a civilian," Davis said suddenly, his voice shaky. "This is getting way out of hand." "Shut up, Davis," Brooks snapped. "Nobody's talking about murder. We're just going to help her understand that she needs to find a different job." Kumar was looking increasingly uncomfortable as well. "Maybe we should just report her to Major Thompson, get her fired through official channels." "Official channels take too long," Williams said, stepping closer to Sarah. "And they might not work. Sometimes you have to solve problems yourself." Sarah could see the fear and uncertainty in some of the cadets' faces. Davis and Kumar were clearly having second thoughts, while Peterson looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. But Brooks, Johnson, and Williams were committed to their course of action. "Last chance," Brooks said, now standing just behind Sarah near the roof's edge. "Resign from the academy tonight. Pack your things and leave first thing in the morning." "And if I don't?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Brooks smiled coldly. "Then you might have an accident during a late-night inspection of the roof. Very tragic. Very unfortunate." The wind picked up, causing the metal railings to vibrate slightly with a low humming sound. Below them, the academy's security lights illuminated empty walkways and perfectly maintained grounds. "You're making a serious mistake," Sarah said, turning slightly to face Brooks directly. "The only mistake here was the academy hiring you in the first place," Brooks replied, placing his hands on Sarah's shoulders. "What happened next occurred so quickly that the cadets would later have trouble explaining it to investigators." Brooks pushed hard, intending to shove Sarah against the railing and force her over the edge. But instead of stumbling forward helplessly, Sarah pivoted smoothly, using Brooks' own momentum against him. In one fluid motion, she grabbed his wrist, twisted his arm behind his back, and swept his legs out from under him. Brooks crashed to the roof surface with a grunt of pain and surprise, his face pressed against the concrete while Sarah maintained control of his arm. "What the hell?" Johnson shouted, lunging forward to help his friend. Sarah released Brooks and spun to face Johnson's attack. As he reached for her, she ducked under his outstretched arms, drove her elbow into his solar plexus, and followed up with a palm strike to his chest that sent him stumbling backward. Williams tried to grab Sarah from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist. She dropped her center of gravity, grabbed his forearms, and threw him over her hip in a perfect judo throw that sent him sprawling across the roof. "Holy shit," Peterson whispered, backing away rapidly. The three remaining cadets, Davis, Kumar, and Peterson, stood frozen in shock as they watched their supposedly helpless victim systematically disable their three strongest fighters in a matter of seconds. Brooks struggled to his feet, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You got lucky," he snarled, pulling out his phone. "But this isn't over." He began filming with his phone's camera while the others gathered themselves. "Everyone needs to see this," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "This crazy woman just attacked us." "You attacked me," Sarah corrected calmly, but Brooks ignored her. "We came up here for a meeting." "And she went psycho," Brooks announced to his phone camera. "Look at this. Look what she did to us." Johnson was holding his chest where Sarah's palm strike had landed, while Williams sat on the ground testing his shoulder for injuries. None of them were seriously hurt, but their pride was demolished. "She's some kind of psycho," Brooks continued filming. "Look how she hurt us. She's dangerous." "Turn off the camera," Davis said nervously. "This is evidence of what we tried to do to her." "Shut up, Davis," Brooks snapped, but he lowered the phone slightly. Sarah remained perfectly calm throughout their confusion and anger. "Are any of you injured?" she asked in a professional tone. "Injured?" Brooks shouted. "You just assaulted 3 military cadets." "After you attempted to force me off a roof," Sarah replied evenly. "That's attempted murder, not a prank or hazing." "Nobody was going to push you off the roof," Johnson said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Then what exactly were you planning to do after you forced me over the railing?" Sarah asked. The cadets exchanged uncomfortable glances. Their plan had been vague beyond the initial threat, but the implication had been clear enough. "We just wanted you to quit," Williams said weakly, still sitting on the ground. "By threatening to kill me?" Sarah said. "Do you understand how serious this is?" Brooks was still filming sporadically, trying to capture something that would make them look like victims rather than attackers. But the evidence was clear. 6 large male cadets had cornered one small female instructor on a rooftop in the middle of the night. "Who the hell are you, really?" Brooks demanded, finally lowering his phone completely. "I'm your physical training instructor," Sarah replied simply. "Bullshit," Johnson said. "No normal person moves like that. Where did you learn to fight?" Sarah looked at each of them carefully before responding. "I learned to defend myself during my military service." "Military service?" Kumar asked. "What branch?" "Navy," Sarah said after a brief pause. "Navy?" Brooks laughed harshly. "My uncle was in the Navy. He never learned anything like what you just did." "Different specialties require different training," Sarah explained vaguely. But Peterson was looking at her with growing recognition. "Wait a minute," he said slowly. "The way you moved, the way you handled 3 guys at once. That's not regular military training." "What are you thinking?" Davis asked. Peterson pointed at Sarah with a shaky hand. "I think she might be Special Forces." The suggestion hung in the air like a bomb that nobody wanted to acknowledge. All 6 cadets stared at Sarah with new expressions, no longer seeing a vulnerable civilian, but trying to process what they might actually be dealing with. "That's impossible," Brooks said, but his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. "Women don't serve in combat units." "That changed several years ago," Kumar said quietly. He was studying military history and knew more about policy changes than the others. "Even if that's true, she's too small," Williams said, struggling to his feet. "Special Forces soldiers are huge." "Not all of them," Peterson replied, still staring at Sarah. "Some units prioritize speed and technique over size." Brooks looked around at his friends, seeing doubt creeping into their faces. His position of leadership was built on confidence and certainty, and both were being undermined by Sarah's unexpected capabilities. "I don't care what she is," he announced, raising his phone again. "She assaulted us, and we have the right to defend ourselves." He began filming again, but his hands were shaking slightly. "This woman attacked us without provocation. We need to call security." "You're right," Sarah agreed calmly. "You should call security. They should know about tonight's events." Her unexpected agreement caught Brooks off guard. "What?" "Call campus security," Sarah repeated. "Tell them exactly what happened here tonight." "You want us to report you for assault?" Johnson asked, confused. "I want you to report everything that happened," Sarah clarified, "starting with how 6 male cadets lured their female instructor to an isolated rooftop at midnight." The implication was clear, and several of the cadets looked sick as they realized how their actions would be interpreted by investigators. "It wasn't like that," Williams said desperately. "Then explain what it was like," Sarah challenged. "Explain why you brought me here. Explain what you intended to do." Brooks was still holding his phone, but he wasn't filming anymore. His carefully constructed plan was falling apart, and he was beginning to understand the legal consequences of what they had attempted. "We just wanted to talk to you," he said weakly. "About what?" Sarah asked. About your teaching methods," Brooks replied. But even he didn't believe it anymore. "And you felt that required 6-against-1 confrontation on a rooftop in the middle of the night?" Sarah's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. Davis was the first to crack completely. "This is insane," he said, his voice rising. "We tried to kill her, and she's acting like she's conducting a debriefing." "Nobody tried to kill anybody," Brooks insisted, but his protest sounded hollow. "You threatened to push me off a 5-story building?" Sarah reminded him. We were just trying to scare you," Peterson said miserably. "Mission accomplished," Sarah replied. "But not in the way you intended." The 6 cadets stood around her in various states of confusion and fear. Their night of planned intimidation had turned into a disaster that could end their military careers and possibly result in criminal charges. "What happens now?" Kumar asked quietly. Sarah looked at each of them for a long moment before responding. "That depends on several factors." "Like what?" Williams asked. "Like whether you understand how serious your mistakes were tonight," Sarah said, "and whether you're capable of learning from them." Brooks was desperately trying to regain control of the situation. "Look, maybe we all got a little carried away," he said, "but nothing really happened. Nobody got hurt." "Nobody got hurt because I prevented you from hurting me," Sarah corrected, "not because you changed your minds." "So, what do you want?" Johnson asked. "Money? Are you going to blackmail us?" Sarah looked genuinely surprised by the suggestion. "I want you to think about what kind of officers you're training to become," she said, "and whether the military needs leaders who solve problems through intimidation and violence against their subordinates." Her words hit harder than her physical techniques had. These cadets had spent years preparing for military careers, building their identities around the idea of honorable service and leadership. Being confronted with the reality of their behavior was devastating. "We're not usually like this," Kumar said quietly. "This isn't who we are." "Then who are you?" Sarah asked. "And why did you let it get this far?" The question forced them to examine their actions and motivations in a way they had been avoiding. Brooks had led them into this situation through a combination of charisma, peer pressure, and gradual escalation that had normalized increasingly extreme behavior. "I think we got caught up in group dynamics," Peterson said thoughtfully. "Brooks made it seem like we were defending the Academy's honor." "I was defending our honor," Brooks protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "By threatening to murder someone?" Davis shot back. "That's not honor. That's just thuggery." The group was beginning to fracture as individual cadets started processing what they had actually done. The weight of their actions was sinking in, and the potential consequences were becoming clear. "I need to know something," Williams said suddenly, looking directly at Sarah. "Are you really Special Forces?" Sarah studied his face for a moment before responding. "Yes." The single-word confirmation hit the cadets like a physical blow. Everything they had assumed about their new instructor, her qualifications, her background, her ability to handle their harassment, had been completely wrong. "What kind of Special Forces?" Peterson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Navy SEAL," Sarah replied simply. The revelation changed everything. Navy SEALs were legendary among military enthusiasts, known for completing the most dangerous and difficult missions in the world. The idea that they had tried to intimidate a SEAL was so absurd that several cadets actually laughed from shock. "You're a Navy SEAL," Brooks repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. "Former Navy SEAL," Sarah clarified. "I completed my service and took this job because I wanted to help train the next generation of military leaders." "Oh my God," Kumar said, sitting down heavily on the roof. "We tried to push a Navy SEAL off a building." "How many combat deployments?" Johnson asked, his earlier hostility replaced by something approaching awe. "That's classified," Sarah replied. The cadets looked at each other with growing realization of just how badly they had misjudged their situation. They had seen Sarah's small stature and quiet demeanor as weakness, never imagining that she was one of the most highly trained warriors in the world. "This explains so much," Peterson said. "The way you handled our workouts, the way you stayed calm when we were being disrespectful, the way you just fought off 3 of us like it was nothing. Combat training teaches you to stay focused under pressure," Sarah explained, "and to assess threats accurately." "Were we actually a threat to you?" Williams asked. 6 against 1, on an isolated rooftop, with clear intent to cause harm? Sarah looked at him seriously. "Yes, you were a threat. Not the kind of threat I faced overseas, but a real threat nonetheless." The comparison to overseas combat missions sent chills through the cadets. They were beginning to understand that they had attacked someone who had faced Taliban fighters, terrorist operatives, and enemy soldiers in life-or-death situations. "Why didn't you just tell us who you were from the beginning?" Davis asked. "Because my military record isn't relevant to teaching physical fitness," Sarah replied. "And because I wanted to be judged on my performance as an instructor, not on my past achievements." "But if we had known," Kumar began, "if you had known, you would have treated me with respect based on fear rather than professionalism," Sarah finished. "That's not the kind of respect that matters." Brooks was staring at the ground, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistakes. His leadership had nearly resulted in the attempted murder of a decorated war hero. The shame was overwhelming. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Sorry isn't enough," Sarah replied. "You need to understand why this happened and how to prevent it from happening again." She looked around at all 6 cadets. "You're going to be military officers. People will depend on your judgment, your integrity, and your ability to lead under pressure. Tonight you showed that you're not ready for that responsibility." The harsh assessment was accurate, and none of them could argue with it. "What do we do now?" Peterson asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. These young men had made serious mistakes, but they were still cadets preparing for military service. Their future actions would determine whether tonight's events were a learning experience or a precursor to worse behavior. "Now you prove that you're capable of learning from this," she said finally, "and you decide what kind of officers you want to become." The confrontation on the rooftop was ending, but the real consequences were just beginning. 6 promising military cadets had discovered that their assumptions about strength, leadership, and honor were dangerously flawed. And their instructor, a quiet Navy SEAL veteran seeking a peaceful transition to civilian life, had been forced to remind them that true warriors don't need to prove their strength through intimidation. As dawn approached over Pine Ridge Military Academy, the lives of everyone involved had been forever changed by a single night's events on a rooftop. The next morning arrived gray and cold, with heavy clouds threatening rain over Pine Ridge Military Academy. Sarah woke early, as she had every morning for the past 15 years, and went through her usual routine of physical exercise and mental preparation. But today felt different. The events on the rooftop had forced her to confront questions about her new civilian life that she had been avoiding. At 0600 hours, Sarah's phone rang. Major Thompson's voice was tense and formal. "Ms. Martinez, I need you in my office immediately. We have a situation that requires discussion." Sarah dressed quickly and made her way across the campus. The dormitory buildings were quiet, with most cadets still asleep. But she noticed unusual activity around the main administrative building. Several faculty members were arriving early, and campus security vehicles were parked near the entrance. Major Thompson's office was crowded when Sarah arrived. Besides the major himself, 3 other people were present: Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the Academy's headmaster, Colonel James Mitchell, the senior military science instructor, and Officer Patricia Hayes from the local police department. "Please sit down, Ms. Martinez," Dr. Warren said, her voice carefully neutral. "We need to discuss what happened last night." Sarah took the offered chair and waited. She had expected this conversation, though she was surprised by the police presence. "6 of our senior cadets came to my office this morning," Major Thompson began. "They reported an incident involving you on the academy rooftop." "What exactly did they report?" Sarah asked. "They claim you assaulted them during a meeting," Colonel Mitchell said, consulting his notes. "Cadet Brooks has video evidence of the altercation." Officer Hayes leaned forward. "I've reviewed the footage, and it does show you using physical force against multiple cadets. I need to understand the circumstances that led to that confrontation." Sarah looked around the room before responding. "Did the cadets explain why they brought me to the rooftop at midnight?" "They said they wanted to discuss concerns about your teaching methods," Dr. Warren replied. 6 18-year-old male cadets felt that a private meeting on an isolated rooftop in the middle of the night was the appropriate way to discuss teaching methods. Sarah's voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. Major Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "They admit the setting was inappropriate, but that doesn't justify physical violence." "What would justify physical violence, Major?" Sarah asked. "Imminent threat of serious bodily harm," Colonel Mitchell answered automatically, then stopped as he realized the implication. "Exactly," Sarah said. "So the question becomes, did 6 male cadets pose a threat of serious bodily harm to their female instructor when they cornered her on a rooftop and threatened to push her off?" Officer Hayes was taking careful notes. "Did they actually threaten to push you off the roof?" "Yes. Specifically, Cadet Brooks placed his hands on my shoulders and attempted to force me over the railing while making threats about accidents happening to instructors who don't belong at military academies." The room fell silent. This was a very different version of events than what the cadets had initially reported. "That would constitute attempted murder," Officer Hayes said slowly. "Which is why I defended myself," Sarah replied, using the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat. Dr. Warren was looking increasingly troubled. Why didn't the cadets mention these threats in their initial report? Because they realized that attempted murder carries serious legal consequences, Sarah said. It was easier to claim they were the victims of an unprovoked assault. Major Thompson was reviewing his notes from the morning meeting with the cadets. They did seem nervous when they came to my office, and their stories weren't entirely consistent. I'd like to interview each cadet separately, Officer Hayes said. Stories tend to become more accurate when people can't coordinate their alibis. Colonel Mitchell was studying Sarah with new interest. The way you handled 6 attackers simultaneously suggests advanced combat training. What's your military background? Sarah hesitated for a moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. I was hoping to keep this private, but circumstances have changed. She handed the envelope to Dr. Warren, who opened it and read the contents. The headmaster's eyes widened progressively as she worked through the documents. My God, Dr. Warren whispered, you're Navy SEAL Team 6? Former SEAL Team 6, Sarah corrected. I completed my service and received an honorable discharge 18 months ago. Major Thompson and Colonel Mitchell were staring at her in shock. Officer Hayes looked confused. What's SEAL Team 6? She asked. The most elite special operations unit in the U.S. military, Colonel Mitchell explained in an awed voice. They handle the most dangerous and sensitive missions worldwide: counterterrorism, hostage rescue, assassination of high-value targets. The Bin Laden raid, Major Thompson added quietly. Sarah nodded. Among other operations, Dr. Warren was still reading through Sarah's military records. 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, Navy Cross. She looked up at Sarah. Why are you teaching at a military prep academy? You could have any position you wanted. I wanted a quiet life, Sarah replied simply. After 15 years of combat deployments, I thought teaching would be peaceful. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone in the room. A decorated war hero seeking peace had been attacked by the very students she was trying to help. This changes everything, Officer Hayes said. If what you're saying is accurate, these cadets attempted to murder a military officer. Former military officer, Sarah corrected. And I'd prefer to handle this internally, if possible. Why? Dr. Warren asked. These young men committed serious crimes. Sarah was quiet for a long moment before answering. Because they're still just kids who made terrible choices. Destroying their lives won't help anyone. Their choice could have destroyed your life, Colonel Mitchell pointed out. But it didn't, Sarah replied. And now they have an opportunity to learn from their mistakes and become better officers. Officer Hayes was not convinced. These weren't just mistakes. This was premeditated assault with intent to commit murder. Which is why the consequences need to be serious enough to prevent it from happening again, Sarah agreed. But not so severe that 6 promising young men lose their chances at military careers entirely. Dr. Warren set down Sarah's military records and looked directly at her. What do you recommend? Full accountability, Sarah said immediately. They need to understand the severity of what they did and face appropriate consequences, but they also need guidance to help them understand how to be better leaders. You're willing to continue working with them after they tried to kill you? Major Thompson asked incredulously. If they're willing to do the work necessary to earn that opportunity, Sarah replied. Over the next hour, they developed a plan that would address the situation comprehensively. The 6 cadets would face formal disciplinary action through the Academy's honor system, be required to complete extensive community service, undergo leadership counseling, and be placed on probation for the remainder of their time at Pine Ridge. But first, Officer Hayes insisted, I need to interview each cadet individually to get accurate statements about what actually happened. The interviews began that afternoon. When confronted with the inconsistencies in their stories and the seriousness of the potential charges, the cadets quickly abandoned their victim narrative and told the truth about their actions. Brooks was the last to be interviewed, and he was visibly shaken when he entered the conference room where Officer Hayes and Dr. Warren were waiting. "Cadet Brooks," Dr. Warren began, "your fellow cadets have provided detailed accounts of last night's events. Before we continue, I want you to understand that you're facing potential criminal charges for attempted murder." Brooks's face went white. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," he said quietly. "But it did go that far," Officer Hayes replied. "You threatened to push your instructor off a 5-story building." "I was angry," Brooks said miserably. "She made me look weak in front of my friends." "She made you look weak by asking you to perform exercises correctly?" Dr. Warren asked. "No, she didn't act like a normal instructor," Brooks struggled to explain. "She was too calm, too quiet. It felt like she was hiding something." "She was hiding something," Officer Hayes said. "She was hiding the fact that she's one of the most highly decorated combat veterans in the country." Brooks stared at the table. "We found that out the hard way." "Do you understand how serious this situation is?" Dr. Warren asked. "Yes, ma'am," Brooks replied. "I could go to prison. We all could." "More than that," Dr. Warren said. "You attacked someone who has spent her life serving our country, someone who volunteered for the most dangerous missions to protect people like you." The weight of this realization seemed to crush Brooks completely. He put his head in his hands and began to cry. "I'm sorry," he said through his tears. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I convinced the others to do it." Dr. Warren softened her tone slightly. "Tell me what you were thinking. Help me understand how this happened." Brooks looked up, his face red and tear-streaked. "I felt like she was challenging my authority, like she was showing up everything I thought I knew about military training. It made me feel small." "So you decided to make her feel smaller?" Officer Hayes asked. "I guess," Brooks admitted. "I thought if I could make her quit, it would prove that I was right about her not belonging here." "And when intimidation didn't work, you escalated to threats of murder," Dr. Warren said. "It wasn't supposed to be murder," Brooks protested weakly. I don't know what I thought. I was just angry and wanted to scare her." "By pushing her off a roof," Officer Hayes said flatly. Brooks had no answer for that. The logical progression of his actions was clear, and he couldn't deny where they had been leading. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "That depends partly on you," Dr. Warren replied, "and partly on Ms. Martinez." "What do you mean?" "She's asked for the opportunity to work with you and the other cadets involved, to help you understand leadership and make better choices." Brooks looked shocked. "She wants to help us?" "After what we did?" "Apparently," Dr. Warren said, "though I'm not sure any of you deserve that consideration." "We don't," Brooks said immediately. "We don't deserve anything from her." "Then why is she offering it?" Brooks thought about the question seriously. I think because she's a real leader, and real leaders try to make other people better, even when those people don't deserve it." It was the most insightful thing Brooks had said since the incident began, and Dr. Warren made a note of it. The formal disciplinary hearing was held 3 days later. All 6 cadets appeared before a panel consisting of Dr. Warren, Major Thompson, Colonel Mitchell, and 2 senior cadet officers. Sarah was present as a witness, but she had specifically requested not to sit on the judgment panel. One by one, the cadets took full responsibility for their actions. There were no excuses, no attempts to minimize their behavior, and no efforts to shift blame. The interviews with Officer Hayes had forced them to confront the reality of what they had done. Peterson spoke for the group when he said, "We betrayed everything this academy stands for. We attacked someone who has served our country with honor, and we did it because we were too proud to admit that we didn't know as much as we thought we did." The panel deliberated for 2 hours before announcing their decision. All 6 cadets would be suspended from regular classes for 1 month and required to complete 200 hours of community service. They would forfeit their leadership positions within the cadet corps and be placed on disciplinary probation until graduation. Most significantly, they would be required to complete a special leadership course designed and taught by Sarah herself. This course will focus on character development, ethical decision-making, and the responsibilities of military leadership, Dr. Warren announced. Successful completion will be required for graduation. When the hearing concluded, Brooks approached Sarah hesitantly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I want you to know that I understand what I did to you, and I understand that you don't owe me anything." Sarah looked at him steadily. "What do you understand about what you did?" "I tried to murder you because you made me feel insecure about my abilities," Brooks said. "I put my pride ahead of honor, law, and basic human decency. And now I want to learn how to be the kind of leader you are," Brooks said. "If you're willing to teach me." Sarah nodded slowly. "Leadership isn't about proving you're stronger than other people, Cadet Brooks. It's about making other people stronger than they thought they could be." "Yes, ma'am," Brooks replied. "I think I'm beginning to understand that." The special leadership course began the following week. Instead of the gymnasium, Sarah held classes in a small conference room where the 6 cadets could discuss real leadership scenarios and ethical dilemmas. "Leadership is tested most severely when you're under pressure," Sarah explained during their first session. "Anyone can make good decisions when everything is going well. Real leaders make good decisions when they're scared, angry, or feeling threatened." She looked around at the 6 young men who had attacked her just days earlier. "You were all under pressure that night on the roof. You felt your status and self-image were being threatened. How did you respond?" "We made terrible decisions," Kumar said. "We let emotions override our judgment." "More specifically?" Sarah prompted. "We decided that hurting someone else would make us feel better about ourselves," Johnson said. "We thought that if we could prove you were weak, it would prove we were strong." "And what did you actually prove?" "That we weren't ready to be leaders," William said quietly. "Real leaders protect people who are vulnerable. They don't attack them." Over the following weeks, Sarah put the cadets through scenarios based on real leadership challenges she had faced during her military service. She taught them about moral courage, ethical decision-making under pressure, and the responsibility that comes with authority over other people. "In combat, your decisions affect whether your teammates live or die," she explained. "In leadership positions, your decisions affect whether the people under your command succeed or fail, advance or stagnate, thrive or suffer." She had the cadets study historical examples of leadership failures, incidents where pride, fear, or poor judgment had resulted in unnecessary casualties or mission failures. Every one of these failures started with a leader who put their personal concerns ahead of their professional responsibilities, Sarah pointed out. Just like what happened on that roof. The transformation in the 6 cadets was gradual but noticeable. Brooks, in particular, seemed determined to understand not just what he had done wrong, but why he had been capable of such poor judgment. "I think I was so focused on being seen as a leader that I forgot about actually leading," he said during one session. "I was more concerned with my image than with doing the right thing." "That's a common mistake," Sarah replied. "Real leadership isn't about what other people think of you. It's about what you can accomplish for other people." "How do you stay focused on that when people are challenging your authority?" Peterson asked. "By remembering that your authority comes from your responsibility to serve others, not your right to control them," Sarah explained. "If someone challenges your authority, the question isn't whether you can prove you're stronger than them. The question is whether you're doing the best job possible for the people counting on your leadership." As the course progressed, word spread throughout the academy about what had really happened that night on the roof. The story became legendary among the cadets, not as a tale of successful intimidation, but as an example of what could happen when pride and poor judgment overcame training and values. The 6 cadets involved became something of pariahs among their classmates initially, but Sarah encouraged them to use this isolation as an opportunity for reflection and growth. "Being unpopular because you made mistakes is temporary," she told them. "But the character you develop while you're working to make amends will last your entire career." By the end of the special course, the 6 cadets had completed extensive community service projects, written detailed essays about military leadership principles, and demonstrated their understanding through practical exercises. For their final project, Sarah assigned them to design and implement a character development program for younger cadets, a way to help others avoid the mistakes they had made. "Leadership is ultimately about legacy," she explained. "What kind of leaders will the people you influence become? How will your actions today affect the military's culture tomorrow?" Brooks's group designed a mentorship program that paired senior cadets with younger students, focusing on character development and ethical decision-making. The program included regular discussions about the responsibilities of military service and the importance of moral courage. "We want to make sure that future cadets understand what we didn't," Brooks explained during his presentation. "That real strength comes from protecting others, not dominating them." When graduation day arrived 6 months later, all 6 cadets participated in the ceremony. They had completed their academic requirements, fulfilled their disciplinary obligations, and successfully finished Sarah's leadership course. Brooks approached Sarah after the ceremony, now wearing the uniform of a 2nd lieutenant in the Marine Corps. "Ma'am," he said, offering a sharp salute, "I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to learn from my mistakes instead of just being punished for them." Sarah returned the salute. "What did you learn?" "That leadership is a privilege that has to be earned every day," Brooks replied. "And that the best leaders are the ones who make other people better, not the ones who prove they're better than other people." "And what will you do with that knowledge?" "I'll try to be the kind of officer you taught me to be," Brooks said. "Someone who protects people instead of threatening them, someone who builds others up instead of tearing them down." Sarah smiled, the first time Brooks had seen her show genuine warmth. "That's all any of us can do, Lieutenant. Try to be better tomorrow than we were today." As the graduation ceremony concluded and families gathered to congratulate the new officers, Sarah stood quietly at the edge of the celebration. Her experiment in civilian life had not gone as planned, but it had accomplished something important. 6 young men who might have become dangerous and abusive leaders had instead learned crucial lessons about character, humility, and the true nature of strength. The military they were joining would be better because of the hard lessons they had learned on a rooftop one night at Pine Ridge Military Academy. Dr. Warren approached Sarah as the crowd began to disperse. "Are you planning to stay with us?" the headmaster asked. Sarah looked around at the academy grounds, where young people were preparing for lives of service and leadership. "Yes," she said. "I think this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." The quiet life she had sought was not the peaceful retirement she had originally envisioned. Instead, it was the deep satisfaction of knowing that her skills and experience were being used to shape the character of future military leaders. And sometimes, Sarah reflected, the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with wisdom, patience, and the willingness to help others learn from their mistakes. The Navy SEAL who had sought peace had found something better, purpose in preparing others to serve with honor.